There's a moment, you've probably felt it, when someone walks into a room and something shifts. You can't immediately explain why. They haven't said anything remarkable. They haven't done anything to demand attention. But something about the way they occupy space makes people unconsciously recalibrate around them. Conversations adjust. Postures shift. People become slightly more careful, slightly more considered, without being able to articulate exactly why. Most men spend years trying to manufacture that effect through what they say, through the right words, the right status signals, the right achievements they can reference in conversation. But the men who actually have that quality, genuinely not as a performance, understand something different. It starts before the words. Long before you open your mouth, your nervous system is broadcasting a signal, and every person in your vicinity is receiving it, not consciously but somatically, in their bodies, in the subtle recalibration of how safe, how comfortable, how challenged they feel in your presence. This isn't mysticism, it's neuroscience and behavioral psychology colliding in real time every time you enter a space. And the men who have never been taught this, which is most men, are broadcasting a signal they didn't choose and can't control until now. 5 dimensions of presence, each one operating below the level of conscious conversation. Together, they compose something that can't be faked, performed, or borrowed. Let's go deep on this. 1. The nervous system underneath the persona. Before we talk about how you walk or how you speak, we need to talk about something more foundational. Because most advice about confidence addresses the surface. Stand straight, speak slowly, take up space. And while those things matter, they're downstream of something more primary. Your nervous system state. Here's what's actually happening when someone walks into a room and commands it effortlessly. Their autonomic nervous system is regulated. They're operating from what researchers call a ventral vagal state. Calm, alert, socially engaged, not threatened. And that state radiates outward in ways that are imperceptible to the conscious mind, but deeply legible to the social brain. Contrast that with someone who's anxious, even a man who's learned to perform confidence on top of that anxiety. His micro-expressions are slightly off. His laughter is timed a half-beat wrong. He fills silences a little too quickly. He makes eye contact, but doesn't quite hold it with ease. People can't name what they're picking up, but they feel it. The man in a regulated state isn't trying to convince anyone of anything. He's not monitoring how he's landing. He's not internally narrating his own performance. He's just present fully in the room, fully in his body. And that quality, that genuine settledness, is what every technique for confidence is actually trying to approximate. So the real work isn't in the technique. It's in building a nervous system that defaults to calm under social pressure. That means the practices most men skip: genuine physical recovery, time and solitude, removing chronic low-grade stressors from your environment, developing a relationship with discomfort so it stops triggering your threat response. The man who has done that work doesn't need to manage his presence. His presence manages itself. 2. Economy of movement. Why? Less physical noise carries more authority. Watch how men move in high-pressure social situations. The ones who feel uncertain tend to generate what behavioral scientists call displacement behaviors. Subtle, largely unconscious physical actions that serve no functional purpose but leak internal anxiety outward. Touching the face, shifting weight from foot to foot, adjusting clothing unnecessarily, moving through a space slightly too quickly as if they need to get to where they're going before someone notices them in transit. None of these are dramatic. None are obviously readable as insecurity to an untrained eye. But socially, they land. They register. They form part of the composite signal that tells the people around you, at a level below conscious thought, something about your relationship with your own presence. Now, observe the opposite. A man who moves with economy, not stiffness, not the performed slowness that some people mistake for authority, but genuine, unhurried purposefulness. He sits without immediately readjusting. He stands without searching for something to do with his hands. He crosses a room at a pace that suggests he's comfortable with being seen in motion. The psychology here is rooted in something called behavioral leakage. The body expresses what the mind is experiencing, regardless of what words are being used. And movement, especially unconscious movement, leaks more than almost any other channel. The practice is not about choreographing your physicality. That creates a different kind of self-consciousness that's equally readable. It's about developing genuine comfort with stillness, with being in a space without needing to signal, adjust, or manage your own image through physical activity. Stillness, in a world of constant, anxious motion, is its own form of authority. The man who can simply be somewhere without broadcasting internal noise through his body occupies a completely different social frequency than the men around him. 3. The architecture of how you speak. This isn't about what you say. It's about the structure of how your communication exists in space and time. There are two fundamentally different relationships a man can have with speech. In the first, speech is a response to social pressure, a way of filling silence, managing other people's comfort, proving value, and staying engaged enough that you don't lose your place in the dynamic. In this mode, words come quickly. Sentences trail off into laughter or softening qualifiers. Statements get walked back slightly when they meet resistance. In the second relationship, speech is an instrument. It's deployed when it serves a purpose. Silence is not a void to be filled, but a space with its own communicative function. Statements are complete when made and don't require immediate validation to remain standing. The behavioral difference between these two modes is immediately perceptible to everyone in the conversation, even if they can't articulate what they're noticing. Specifically, watch what happens at the end of your sentences. Most men, especially under social pressure, allow their vocal tone to rise slightly at the end of declarative statements, unconsciously converting a statement into something that sounds like a question, seeking confirmation even when delivering information. The man who speaks from genuine groundedness does the opposite. His statements land and stay landed. His voice doesn't reach upward for approval at the end of a thought. And perhaps most tellingly, he pauses before speaking, not just during. That pre-speech pause is enormously loaded with social information. It signals that what's about to be said has been considered, that he's not racing to fill space, that his words are coming from somewhere deliberate rather than somewhere anxious. You don't need to speak less to have more impact. You need to mean what you say and let that meaning exist without immediately undermining it. 4. Eye contact as a window into self-certainty. This is one of the most written about aspects of confidence, and also one of the most misunderstood. Most advice frames eye contact as a dominance display. Hold it longer. Don't look away first. Project intensity. But that framing misses what's actually being communicated, and why some men's eye contact commands respect, while other men's eye contact, even when technically held, creates a kind of uncomfortable pressure that actually repels. Here's the real variable. What's happening behind the eye contact? When a man makes eye contact from a place of genuine comfort with himself, no internal agenda, no performance, no subtle anxiety about how he's being perceived, the contact carries warmth and steadiness simultaneously. People feel seen without feeling assessed. When eye contact is a technique, when it's being maintained deliberately as a power strategy, something subtly different comes through. The contact feels calculating, or it has a kind of blankness behind it. The blankness of someone who's focused on the technique rather than the person in front of them. The third mode, and this is what most anxious men default to, is eye contact that constantly seeks. That glances away not out of calm disengagement, but out of subtle social fear. That checks the other person's reaction after every statement to gauge whether things are okay. That checking, that visual bid for reassurance, is one of the clearest signals that a man's sense of self is externally dependent. The practice, again, is not the technique. It's the internal state. Genuine eye contact flows naturally from being genuinely comfortable with being perceived, from having nothing to hide, nothing to perform, and nothing riding on the other person's reaction. That ease, that non-neediness in the gaze, is what people are actually responding to when they say someone has a commanding presence. It was never about the eyes. It was always about what lives behind them. 5. Response latency. The pause that redefines your status in any interaction. Here's the behavioral principle most men have never heard of, but that operates constantly in every social dynamic they navigate. Response latency refers to the time between when something is said to you and when you respond, and it is one of the most powerful and most overlooked communicators of social status, confidence, and groundedness. In most social interactions, there's an implicit pressure to respond quickly enough to signal engagement, quickly enough to keep the conversational rhythm, quickly enough that the other person doesn't interpret your pause as confusion, discomfort, or social failure. And most men feel that pressure acutely, so they respond fast. Sometimes faster than their actual thinking. Oh, their words come out ahead of their considered response because the social pressure to be there immediately overwhelms the space needed to actually think. Now, Observe a man who has genuine authority in a room. A great interviewer, a composed executive, a man who's deeply comfortable with himself. When asked something, even something pointed or uncomfortable, he doesn't rush. He considers. The pause isn't performed for effect. It's real. It reflects that he's actually processing, that his response will reflect what he genuinely thinks rather than what anxiety prompted first. And here's what that pause communicates to everyone watching. This man is not afraid of this moment. He's not scrambling. He's not in threat response. He has enough internal security that he can afford to take time, because he's not worried about what that time will cost him socially. That latency, that comfortable, considered space before response, resets the perceived status of the interaction. It transfers a subtle authority to whoever can sustain it most naturally. Practiced deliberately, it can feel artificial, but developed as an extension of genuine composure, of actually slowing down your internal clock under pressure, it becomes one of the quietest and most powerful signals you can broadcast. The rushed man says, "I need this to go well." The composed man says, without words, "However this goes, I'm okay." And every person in that conversation feels the difference. Put all 5 of these together, and what you're actually building isn't a set of techniques. You're building a coherent internal signal, a regulated nervous system that stops leaking anxiety into every interaction, a body that moves with purpose rather than broadcasting displacement, speech that exists as communication rather than as social management, eye contact rooted in genuine self-acceptance, a relationship with time, with pauses and latency that signals unhurried certainty rather than anxious urgency. None of these work in isolation as performances. Performed confidence in every one of its forms has a ceiling, and that ceiling is always visible to the people paying attention. But when these qualities emerge from something real, from genuine work on your internal state, your self-knowledge, or your relationship with discomfort, they compound into something that simply cannot be manufactured. And the men who have it know this. They don't have to announce themselves. The room already knows.